Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Pulse. Just a disclaimer that this episode contains topics of suicide and drug use. If you're not comfortable hearing about these, then we suggest you check out another episode like Get the Job with Malini Lad, or check out one of our COVID-19 and its environmental impact episodes. Today we open a conversation about what essential skills that don't get taught in schools. Our spotlight for this episode is on mental health, job hunting, taxes, and voting. What did you miss that you wished you had learned before leaving elementary or high school? Let's hop right in.
Things that they make us learn in school that we don't end up using after we leave school, but they're required courses. And then things that they don't teach us in school that are things that we could really use in everyday life, that nobody teaches you. And so I thought it was really neat, and a really good discussion. Things like knowing how to identify depression and anxiety and different mental health disorders could have a big impact on people's lives, and how to deal with money and things like that are all things that they don't really teach you in school, that would be really, really useful.
So, what was something that you wish that you had learned in school that you didn't?
Um, I think it would have been really nice to learn about safe talk, like how to identify depression and how to point people to resources, in a way that isn't like you're depressed, you should go see a counselor kind of thing. It's just, I've noticed this, maybe these people could help you. You get a lot of teenagers who end up committing suicide because of depression, and nobody realized what was going on. So I think if that had been taught at school, it would have really helped a lot of people.
A lot of adults too. I think, if you aren't taught about your own mental health, then you're not going to learn unless you're taught or unless something triggers and it or inspires something in you to go and research that.
Yeah, exactly.
Erin, what's something that you wished you had learned in school?
Definitely dealing with the taxes, I would say. It's only in the last couple of years I've been getting my dad to help me out with it. But let's say if I didn't have my parents with me, let's say I was living in like the foster care system or something like that, and they tend to kick you out at like 18, 19 typically if you, or maybe not kick out, but you age out of the system.
Yeah.
They may not necessarily teach you that sort of thing. And then, of course, once you have to be out on your own, you'd have to rely on your own resources, like maybe going to the library to try to find out, okay, how do I do this sort of thing. It's not like it's something that, but you could have, could have been something that you've learned in school, for example.
Yep.
But for those who may not have a parent in their lives, that's definitely difficult. So it would have been nice to have an option for this in school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. That would be a really nice thing to learn too.
I wish that they had prepared us more for the job hunt and what that's actually going to look like. I think the most instruction I got was you need to work on your resume and print off 100 and then go to the mall and drop them all off. So she's telling this to all of us in all of her classes, in all of the grades. How well do you think that's going to work for all of us?
I don't know what the age of legally able to work was for you when you were younger, Essa, but I
Okay.
know that for currently right now it's 16, well 14 or something if you have a letter from your parents giving permission, but legally able to work is 16.
Hmm.
And I know that in some leadership courses, I think in
Yeah.
like in around grade 10, 11, they do teach you like resumes and cover letters. And I vaguely remember doing a little bit about how to deal with an interview. And again, it just depends on the form of applications. And yes, sometimes all it is dropping off a paper resume, amongst other things. So they do
Hmm.
teach a little bit about it,
Yeah.
at least in high school.
Do you remember those other things?
Resumes, cover letters, interviews?
Yeah. Like, do you remember
Uh,
what they went over?
a little bit.
I remember in planning 10 doing a thing where we went through this test and it told us what the top jobs for us would be, and we had to go look at like what the demand is for that job and what the average income is and what types of education we needed to get the job. And I think there was something about writing a resume, but I remember not feeling very prepared for writing a resume after we finished.
Yeah.
And and definitely I was completely lost on cover letters. They did not explain it very well. If they explained it at all. I don't even remember if they explained it at all. Yeah, so there was a lot about finding the job, but not a lot about actually applying for it, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd have to look over my book to be sure about some of the other stuff that they taught regarding about that, but I do remember vague little bits, just not a lot in detail right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I remember we had to do an exit interview in grade 12 that was supposed to prepare us for interviewing for jobs. But
Or just like a
yeah,
sample exit interview.
well, we had to set up an interview with one of the counselors at our school, and it was supposed to be like preparing us for a job interview, and it was part of the graduation process
Okay, I
at my
see.
school.
Yeah.
And it was like, you have to do this before you graduate.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I remember walking away from it going, I don't think this really prepared me for a real job interview.
About not knowing how to vote. For me, my experience with voting, when it was time to go, I would go with my parents and kind of follow what they were doing. But also, too, I tried to keep an eye on the news, read the newspapers, and think about what might work for what would benefit me or what would be helpful for me
Mm-hmm.
um, from my perspective of things. And then I try to, if I can, get a rough idea. Even if I don't know the person in themselves, I try to get an idea of the party wise, what feels more right for me. Right now, it seems a lot of the responsibility that kids should be learning are being put on the parents. But as I said earlier, not everyone has parents either that may know about that sort of stuff themselves or they may not have parents in their lives at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they're not learning in school is definitely adds more of a challenge to them in their lives.
Yeah.
So things like, for example, with voting, um, I've sort of learned by example by watching my parents
Mm-hmm.
in a way. But also we have a habit of watching the news when we have our dinner. So we learn about what's going on that way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I try to get an idea of what sort of parties, um, what might align for me most in terms of either benefits or what I think suits best, or at least for my perspective of things.
Yep.
Um, So even if I don't necessarily know who the representative is of that party for my area, at least I have a rough idea that, hey, I want to try to vote for this party at least. But yeah, and part of it is by learning by example, but then also trying to think for myself in terms of what works.
It's like if you don't teach people these things when they grow up to be parents, they can't teach that to their kids if it was never taught to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's an excellent point.
Yeah, like if their parents didn't know it, their parents couldn't teach them, and then they can't teach their kids. So
That does it for this week's episode of The Pulse. We hope you enjoyed this episode and hope you'll come back next week for another great episode about school and the things that we missed in school. We'd really love to hear from you. What are some things that you missed in school? What are some things that maybe you were taught that you feel like you could have learned better? What would you teach your kids today? We'll come right back to this conversation next week, and we hope to see you there. thanks for listening, and those of you on YouTube, thanks for watching.